I'm here to present about all kinds of things this morning. We are going to talk about expulsions, transfers, custody issues, and attendance. This PowerPoint or Google slide, whatever it is purposely pretty bare because I want to be able to spend some time talking about what you need to talk about and questions that you need answered. So we'll go ahead and dive right in. I'm going in order of what they're listed here. The first one is expulsions. I know if you're a secondary administrator, you got to participate in at least one expulsion appeal hearing. I think everybody got to participate in at least 5. So just statistics to see what we had in the past year. And my only frame of reference is, of course, this last school year. But there were 41 appeal hearings held. 21 of those were high school, 15 were junior high, and 5 were middle school. Now the results of those were about 50-50. 20 expulsions were upheld as presented, and 21 were modified in some way. Now the modifications varied so much, it was difficult to come up with, these went back, these went to ALE, these got a semester instead of a year. So I just lumped them all into one group. Overall, I think the expulsion appeal process works. I know that the parents appreciate being heard, and so I appreciate all of your work who've gotten to come and sit with me through those sometimes long and usually really hard appeals. A couple of things that I saw and that you all talked to me about over the year were just some consistency in knowing what's expected when you come and sit at the end of the table for an expulsion. So that means you were the administrator who expelled. And it's hard when we have a district this big to have consistency in discipline. And I don't know how to, I still don't know how to get there without boxing you as administrators in and saying, if a student does X, this is your only choice. So I wish I had a solution to that problem, but I think some of the discussion we can have today may help a little bit. So for next year, a couple of things that I'd like to see happen. I need copies of all Form Cs. I get them from some schools, I don't get them from some schools, and I'm not going to go through and say, oh, you shouldn't have expelled them, they're going back. All I would need to know is numbers. Technically, legally, the only person that can expel a student is our school board, and so if we don't even know who has been expelled, that's hard to put that into practice. I'd also like to look at trends, see a number. I just don't have a concept of what expulsion looks like district-wide. So if everybody will send me their Form Cs next year. Updated forms. There's a link to a folder here that has updated expulsion A, B, and C forms. They basically look the same as they have as they did last year. I'm working on getting them translated into Spanish and Marshallese, and those will be dropped into this folder as well. One thing, I'll open Form C, since that's the form that leads to expulsion. Some do this, not all. Include a brief narrative, and it doesn't have to be your full statement of, on this day I talked to this student, that gets into a couple of pages long, but just a paragraph that's enough for the parent and the student to know this happened and this is why the student is being expelled. A question that I get a lot and something that I see inconsistencies a lot is how long a parent has to come appeal 5 full school days. And so what that means is the day that you hand them the form, that's day 0. So after that, count 1, 2, 3, 4. On the 5th school day, the form is due by 4 o'clock. It previously said noon, but because that gets a little tricky on what a full school day is, we're going to say 4 o'clock on the 5th school day. We enforce that strictly. I have had several moms, grandmas, dads upset because they didn't turn in their form on time, but we have to enforce that deadline. But I also see sometimes parents would get a couple of weeks to turn that form in, and if for some reason a student was sent back to school, they could potentially be out 3 or 4 weeks through the appeal process before that happened. So this will speed it up. They've got 5 days to file an appeal. I've got 5 days to schedule an appeal hearing, which typically happens. I had a couple that had to go outside, and then there's resolution to it, whether it's modifying or upholding the expulsion. Yes.
And that's 5 school days, correct?
Yes, 5 full school days. So if it's a holiday, well, then if it gets up until, say it was right before Christmas break, we'd need to count business days. If the central office is open, count that, but it does not count weekends. Do you have any questions about that so far? Is there anything else that you see that needs to be changed for Form C, or something that you feel like's not working there? Okay. Okay, also included in the packet, there is a form that you'll see the link here. It's a trespassing form. HAR-BER High School actually started doing this, and I really like it. It's just a acknowledgement that if a student is expelled, they're not to be on any school property in the state. The parent signs it, and so then when they come back and say, nobody ever told me that, we can say, yes, here it is, you signed it. And then finally on this slide, a model expulsion packet. This goes through, well, this starts out with a demographic page that I really like. So you'll see it says, what happened, parents' names, they have a 504, IEP, manifestation, what was the result, when was it held. So this just will give our appeal panel right off the bat the basics on the student. And then the documents enclosed is basically what is provided anyway, but I get questions on what do we need to bring. If you will look at this template, fill out the demographic page, and then attach those documents, you'll have everything you need when you come to the expulsion appeal. Okay.
So I've always been concerned about like including other discipline issues because you're not there because of those.
Right. But I think it's relevant. We can't look at a particular instance in tunnel vision and say, you know, this happened without regard to what's happened previously. You know, if a student's being expelled, say, for a drug offense, and they've had 15 drug offenses that haven't resulted in expulsion, or maybe they were expelled and they came back, that's relevant to me. Now, it doesn't need to be, oh, I don't think you got a severe enough punishment back here, so we're going to make up for that in this expulsion. But it's relevant if a student has a history of behavior, and if they don't. You know, sometimes expulsion's not appropriate for a student who's never had any trouble and made one mistake. Sometimes it is, but I don't have a problem with including it as long as the conversation and the discussion and the result is not a punishment for prior acts. And parents get a little upset about that sometimes, but the relevance to me outweighs their concerns, as long as it's a factor, not a we're punishing for what they did previously. I don't know why my present button goes away every time I click off. Do you know?
It's probably the interface. You're in full presentation?
Oh, here we go. No. So you can tell I'm not very technologically savvy, but I'll get back to it. I just have to refresh it. Here we go. Okay, and there's a reminder in here. We already talked about it, about how to count the 5 days. The day you give the form is 0, and then count 5 out from there. Okay, that's all I had in expulsions. I told you it was pretty basic, so it's there now. It's just when I click off.
I think it's here. We just need to, are you going here?
Yeah, but that's not there when I click on a link.
Yeah. You just have to toggle in and out.
Okay.
The two. Okay.
Are there any questions about expulsions before we move on?
It's an elementary.
Yeah, that's fine.
And it kind of started a long time ago. There's the weapon law.
Mm-hmm.
The child brings a weapon to school. It's not an act of expulsion unless the superintendent says no. So I was told many years ago that even a child that brings a pocket knife to school, we should treat that as a weapon and write a letter to Dr. Rollins excusing that child from being expelled from school. And I always thought that was extreme. What is your opinion on that?
If the blade of the knife is over 3 inches, then yes.
But not just a little pocket knife that
If
may accidentally come to school.
measure the blade. And it may be extreme, but that's why there's a process there to write to Dr. Rollins or to have them go through the appeal process.
So while that letter is being written, can the child stay in school? Or
No.
is it just gonna go?
Yeah. But we can typically move pretty quickly on that if that's the case. So it wouldn't be that they'd be out for a month. I mean, it may be a couple of days, but I don't think it would be very long.
And then obviously if they have a little pocket knife and they're using it as a weapon, then that's another.
Oh yeah, that would be a consideration in whether you write that letter to Dr. Rollins or not.
What about bullets?
Bullets?
We've had that a lot.
Bullets would not fall under the weapons law. I'd have to look at exactly what our policy says. I don't know if it includes gun paraphernalia. Mr. Scott, you have some insight?
No, I have a different question.
Oh, okay.
I just put those in my purse.
Yeah, take them with.
I put those in my purse and take them home. We have, where our kids are located, they hunt and fish, and we've had a lot of bullets.
You know, especially at the elementary level, I think it's a conversation with mom and dad more than anything. I'll look at the policy and see if bullets fit anywhere in there. Okay.
I have a question on that, providing the parents expulsion packet 24 hours before the hearing.
Yes.
We provide that opportunity. Like, for an example, I know there was one packet that I presented this year that had an email from a parent about the student being expelled and was sent to the principal. It's just things that we don't need to include in the packet then, right? Because we really don't want those things out in the public probably.
Who was the email from?
It was from another parent in regard to their student, and it was a lengthy email about, hey, this kid is being expelled, he's doing this to my student.
Oh,
And
okay.
so that was presented as evidence in the packet, but if we provide that packet is shredded, right?
It is, but the parents get to take it with them.
Okay.
So if you don't want the parents to see it, then don't put it in there. Yeah, you know, it really gets, the whole purpose,
And it wasn't, I didn't want them to see it, I think it was just, we don't want them to take copies of it, social media, you know, get on Facebook and say, why didn't you send this? Here's the letter, I know you sent it, kind of thing.
yeah,
So start that.
it's tough. I mean, and it's tough with student statements too. I would just weigh whether you need it to put it into the packet, but if it's gonna be used in a hearing against their child, then they need to see it. The whole purpose of a due process hearing is fairness, and so it's uncomfortable for me when parents sit there and say, we've never seen this. Sometimes that's not true, and they've seen it 15 times in 100 languages, but when they truly haven't seen something and they're surprised in an already emotional hearing, that's tough.
Could you black out that information? Like
Yeah,
yourself?
I mean, you could do enough maybe to where they wouldn't know, but in a kind of two people involved in an incident, they always know. They always know the kids.
Should we get that parent permission as well to put it in the packet, just to say, hey, I'd like to put this in as evidence?
Sure.
Just need to be selective.
Yes.
I don't know if
There's,
it made that much difference in that case, but
Yeah, but
I was on that
Yeah.
meeting.
that was really a question from Ms. Davis. She already looked at this, she said, hey, would you ask this?
okay.
Because of that situation.
Yeah.
Just need to be selective.
Okay, what else on expulsions? Okay, we're going to move on to transfers. First, this is just a disclaimer. When a person gets a transfer form signed, say it's an in-district transfer, that is not their golden ticket to go play on whatever team they're at the school they're transferring to. It happens all the time, and we've put now in the letter that comes from me that this does not make you eligible for AAA activities. You need to check with athletic department, band director, whoever it is, to talk about that. Parents are confused on that, and it's a hard conversation sometimes. Okay, just basics of how you get to go to school in Springdale or any school district in the state of Arkansas. You either reside in the district, you have a parent who is a full-time employee of the district, you have a school choice transfer, or you have a board-to-board transfer. So school choice transfer is one time a year option. The applications are due by May 1st, and unless we have lost about 600 students, everybody gets to participate in that. So in our case, everybody gets to participate.
The parent who's a full-time employee, is that contracted, or is it a number of hours, like say a timesheet?
It's 30 hours a week. For the out-of-district transfers, the contract doesn't matter. We'll talk when we get to in-district transfers that the contract does matter. So to come in, just to get a ticket into the Springdale School District, you just have to be 30 or more hours a week employee.
Do the school choice transfers have to be reapplied every year?
No. The school choice transfer, once it's granted, is good until the child graduates, unless they go back to their resident district. I had a dad call me this week, and he said, so I got a school choice transfer granted last year, but we decided we didn't want to go because we couldn't get into the elementary school that we wanted to get into. So now we want to use that school choice transfer again and try again. And it's past May 1st, and I said, no, you voided it by going back. So as long as they come to our district and stay in our district, they're fine. If they move back, they would have to reapply.
And what if they become an attendance problem if they're completely violating the attendance policy?
Once they're in school choice, they're treated just like they live across the street from your school. So there's not, you can't revoke a school choice transfer. They're there. So it would be treated just as if a resident child was having attendance problems with whatever steps you can take there. Okay, the option here, board-to-board transfer, some people call them legal transfers, some people call them out-of-district transfers. Those can happen throughout the year and are only granted when both school boards agree to them. We accept a lot of students via out-of-district transfers. We release very few. That's just the practice and policy of the district. Parents do not like that and feel like they should be able to leave freely, go wherever they want. But the same thing applies to the board-to-board transfer as a school choice transfer, that once they're here unless they go back to their district, their resident district. The law actually says they're supposed to be reviewed every 4 years. I don't know anyone who reviews them every 4 years, but that might be something we could look at. If we got to the 4 years, it could be reviewed. But I've talked to several districts about how do you do a review, what does that look like, and nobody does it, but it's the law, which is funny.
Is there a time frame on this?
They can happen throughout the year. I take out-of-district transfers to our school board just about every month. Some of our neighbor districts only will hear them a couple of times a year. For example, they may only do them in August and December, and so it's up to the district. We'll take them throughout the year, and we do take them throughout the year, mostly from Fayetteville. Rogers is a little bit more restrictive on, they don't like to release students just like we don't.
So on the board-to-board transfer, I thought it was my understanding that I can't provide someone this paperwork, but can I provide a potential student student's parents this paperwork? I thought they had to get it from their school they're wanting to leave.
Oh, it's the same form for everybody, and the form's attached there.
Okay, so that's what I was just asking. So if I have parents asking for the board-to-board transfer, I can give them the paperwork. I'm previously practicing, I had to send them to that district first.
The one that they're wanting to leave will actually have to be the one that signs it first, but we can give them the piece of paper. That's no problem.
Okay, so the second part is a parent, several, I mean more than 5, are saying that the district that they are wanting to leave won't give them the form. Is it bad practice for me to give them the form?
No, the form is public. It's actually on the ADE website. That's where I pulled it from to link it here. So they may just not want to release, and that may be their position, but you can give them the form and have it filled out. And then what typically happens with us is somebody brings us in the form filled out that wants to leave, and I get to call them and say, I'm really sorry, but we don't release students, and we have a nice conversation about that.
So giving them the form is fine.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm curious about money, like after October 1, if this happens, do we get money for those kids?
So funding is based on your prior 3 quarters ADM, so eventually we would, but
It's not that year.
yeah. But they go in and count just as if they're our student. So we would be funded to the same extent a child lives across the street, comes and enrolls in the district. Yeah. October 1 is just when the state looks at enrollment counts. It actually has nothing to do with funding cycles. Okay, on to in-district transfers.
One question real quick.
Okay.
And if this is a different discussion, that's fine. The student transfers, let's say from Rogers to Springdale, and they've lost credit in Rogers, have they still lost credit in Springdale? Or have they lost credit in Springdale?
For attendance?
Yes, ma'am. Student's been going to Rogers, let's say, they've been enrolled for January, February, they've lost credit up there, and then they've transferred down to Springdale and enrolled in Springdale.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know what would give us the authority to then award them credit, because we've got to take them with the transcript that they.
The issue that's come up is, we don't get the attendance records from those kids. So they leave Rogers or wherever the school might be, and we say, we get the transcript, and it says no credit, or it says nothing on there, we find out. But a lot of them do is, but some of them do is, they lose credit because of excessive absences in one district, and move over to, let's say, our district, and they get a refresh, be able to get in, right start, and try to get credit. We don't count the absences they have if they left Rogers or
clarified, I don't think that's allowable. If we wouldn't look at their absences and then not award credit based on our policy, but if they've already been awarded no credit there, then we would say no credit.
But sometimes we don't know that. That's the hard part about it, is sometimes they don't share what their attendance is, we just get the transfer, we don't get their attendance. So what we do is we just give the benefit of the doubt, start all over.
But does it matter why, if their transcript shows no credit, does it matter whether it's attendance or something else?
But you're talking about mid-term, right? Like not after the grading period, but kind of in the middle of it, right? Right?
Yeah, yeah, I'm sorry, I was thinking of something else. I know you find that hard to believe. Yes, we have two situations that come up to us, where a kid will transfer at semester, that's easy enough, because they're gonna put a grade on it. But if they transfer during the semester, there's no grade, a grade doesn't show up on their transcript yet. So they just come in with no credit. Sometimes it's even more confusing, because they show up as an unaccompanied 17-year-old youth that wants to enroll, because they're gonna say they're homeless. And that's a whole different discussion. But there's nothing ironclad that if the kid has come in, that they've had excessive absences in another district, and they come to our district, we kind of have a little bit of wiggle room to set up a situation where they can be successful. Like an attendance contract that's very strict, and then grades, make up grades, blah, blah, blah. That's all legal and good.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm doing a poor job of repeating the questions like I'm supposed to be, so I'll do better on that. 'Cause we're recording so people can watch this later for fun. Okay, in-district transfers. So when I say in-district transfer, I mean that these students already live in Springdale and they want to go somewhere other than their zoned school. Okay, are we on the same page about difference between in-district and out-of-district? There's a policy on this. I'm not sure if many people know, but there is a policy. I've linked it there. It actually takes you to the folder on student policies, but you just scroll down, get to policy JC, and you'll see the reasons that we can grant an in-district transfer. Okay, are we seeing these? Family has moved within 2 weeks of the first day of school. There's a little bit more flexibility with this. We'll talk about feeder patterns in a minute. The two that I want to highlight are family hardship and personal. These should be rare. This should not be, there's so many examples. It's more convenient for me to drive all the way across town and drop my kid off at this school than it is to go to the one across the street. That's not a valid reason. We get it all the time. And personal sensitive issues, I believe is what it says on the form. These are hard because every time the parent thinks that they're very sensitive and very personal issues, but I'll give you an example, and we're going to talk about some specific examples in a minute, but say a parent, I get a transfer form that says my child has been bullied at this school, we want them to go to this school. Okay, my first question is, does the principal of the school that you're attending know about it? A lot of times that answer is no. You know, what has been done? Is it valid? Sometimes we get to the point where the two principals have talked, and it is good for the student to go, something has happened, it's good for them to go and start fresh, and that's okay. But I've been bullied at my school is not the magic ticket to get a transfer granted. So when you see that, if you see that, likely you would see it as someone wanting to come to your school. Please call the other principal and say, hey, what's going on? You know, is this valid? Do you even know about it? Do you think it's good?
Well, Kendra, says the parent's request should go to their homeschool principal first, so they can talk about it, and then that principal then corresponds. And I know we've not.
I think that rarely happens. Just logistically, the person who signs the form is the receiving principal, so I see why it doesn't happen, but it doesn't hurt to have a phone call. I don't have a big problem with if it comes to you, but at least a phone call. I know a lot of times principals don't even know that a transfer's been granted because the home principal never sees the form.
So my babysitter lives in your attendance area, is that a valid reason or not?
Yeah.
What was the question? The babysitter lives in your attendance area.
My after-school babysitter.
Grandparents, we get that one a lot.
Grandparents?
So I don't have a good answer on that. My first response is no, that's not the answer, because then you're going to have all 22,000 parents suddenly having babysitters in one attendance zone or the other. There could be a case where it was a legitimate family hardship. You know, I don't know. Nobody else can take care of the child. Mom works 5 jobs. There's somebody at home to receive the child. They can't pay for after school. I'm not saying it would never happen, but it needs to be rare. The theme of the message on in-district transfers is they should be rare. I should have included in this, but our people in the transportation department actually have pins on every student and where they reside with each attendance zone. And when you see a particular attendance zone that's got a lot of kids that live there, but a whole lot out, that's a problem. And once they're in a transfer pattern, they get to go most of the time, I'll talk about that next, all the way through the feeder pattern. And so that gets really difficult to predict who's coming to particular levels, staffing, and then the attendance zones were crafted so that numbers would be relatively equal across the district, and all of a sudden we've got buildings with not enough kids in them, and then other buildings that are overcrowded. So the goal should be to scrutinize and grant the in-district transfers rarely. Mr. Swope.
Our 5th graders, when they've been transferred in, but say they are supposed to go to Carson Hills, and so they would then feed up to Sonora, we contact those parents and say, you're zoned for Sonora, and so that's where you need to be going next year. If you want your kids to stay at J.O. Kelly, you need to fill out, or go to J.O. Kelly, you need to fill out a new in-district transfer request.
That's correct. And I've got a just transfer point page that I will share with you that's got a lot of this information and some more. So you're talking about when they're going to the next level in the feeder pattern. Yes. So a transfer is good, an in-district transfer is good through your level, but when they're going from elementary to middle, middle to junior, junior to high school, they've got to fill out a new form. We're dealing with this right now, and people are unhappy because they've been in a particular feeder pattern, but now they're going to the next level and there's not room for that student. So if you're a middle, junior, or high school principal, something you need to look at is where your kids live and make sure that they've got transfer forms in place. Now, being in a feeder pattern is a valid reason for granting a transfer, but only if you have room. So that's the big if.
And like some years we would have room, but the next year we don't. But once you grant that, they're in for the rest of the time.
Yes.
And then we then the next year when we don't have room and we've got to let them stay, we force transfer a kid that lives in the zone to another school.
So you're saying if you granted one for 8th and then you didn't have room for them in 9th?
Well, it happens in elementary way more than it happens in junior high, but you get a kid that comes in as a 3rd grade country that has it, so a kid that lives across the street from the school drives, has to get on a bus and ride across town to go to school when there's kids going there on a transfer that get to come in. See my point?
But yeah, I do. But if you go back to the mindset of granting a transfer should be rare, then we shouldn't have many that would force some out. But yes, that scenario could happen.
But that also happens without transfers. I mean, we.
Oh, right.
Without transfers, and that just ship the person across the street off too.
Right.
But in district, parents can't apply for school choice.
They can apply for school choice if they want to leave Springdale, but school choice is out of between districts, not between schools.
So, what if attendance becomes an issue? Like, we have a family coming to our school that they're always late.
Mhm.
And if they would just go to a school that has buses to Biari, that they can just catch a bus. So, I didn't realize, okay.
Confession.
I didn't realize that, so I've been signing forms and just, cause that's what I thought, okay, you wanna come. And,
You're not alone. It's okay.
well, this is stressing me out, but anyway, so, but I've held on to this one family cause they're always late, they're an attendance problem, and we don't have buses at Westwood, we don't have any. So if they would just go to, no, it's awful. Anyway, if we would just go to, Biari and catch the bus, they could get there on time. But what you're saying is they're automatically in my school now for the duration, so
Well, with in-district transfers, you always have the option to revoke. That process is write a letter to Dr. Cleveland and say the reasons that you would want to revoke that transfer. But the parents know when they get the letter saying your transfer is approved, your in-district transfer is approved, that it can be revoked for attendance, disciplinary, space. I mean, I suppose we could get to the point where we're so over, we have to revoke some of those transfers if we were forced transferring a lot back.
So, I have a question. If we were so full that we had to revoke some of the in-district transfers, would they then go to their home school? They're also full. Do they get to go up on their list, but by their enrollment date, or do they go to the bottom of the list and get forced transferred out?
They would go to the bottom of the list and get forced transferred.
So I've essentially like totally messed up these families because,
Oh,
I mean,
But you have a curriculum issue, like down below, there was a curriculum, if there was a specific curriculum, so you could get under the premise
that's
of
what
the
most
IB
of it is
curriculum.
because we're all being.
Yeah.
Right, and that's a valid reason if you've got space for them.
but at some point, we all need to remember about the competition and how, I mean, we want to keep our Springdale people coming to Springdale.
And I know, and I had a conversation yesterday about that, and I understand that, but this is going to sound really cynical, and it may be, but parents are looking for the magic words to put on a form so they can get what they want. And so if they know the magic word is I'm going to Haas Hall or I'm leaving Springdale School District, and we start jumping at that, we're held hostage by, and parents will talk, oh, I got my transfer granted, this is what I said. So what I always tell people when that's the conversation and they're talking to me is go talk to principal, counselor, special ed teacher, whatever services they're needing at the school you're trying to leave, and then, call back and let's talk about it. They leave, and I know it's competition, but we can't let that, we need to compete for them, but we can't let that dictate where they go to school and allow them to dictate where they go to school. I tell every person that I have a conversation like that on is any school in the district is great. Have you been to this school and talked to them? Have you talked to the special ed teacher? It comes up a lot in special ed. So it's hard, and I wish it were, oh, you're leaving to go to another school, we can keep you because of that. But some parents are going to leave regardless. Melissa?
On the in-district form, is there any way to tweak
If you want the next year restriction on a transfer that you're granting, write it on the form, just on the bottom. There's a place for comments, and then we can put it in the letter that I send out.
So are we supposed to be sending you these forms?
Yes. No, you're not the only one.
You might wanna just link that and send it to us all,
Okay.
with some guidelines, because I know not everybody's here who's.
I will,
to hear this.
I have a separate, more detailed transfer, we'll call it protocol process. It's not a policy. But I will put in there that they all need to come to me. The letter that I send out after I sign the forms says this may be revoked for space
And are those
discipline.
letters in other languages?
No, they're not. We probably need to do that. Add to the form if it needs to be translated. You could check a box, and then when we send it out, we can translate it.
Kendra, I know we had a parent this year go down to get a transfer request form from central office and brought it to us, and on the back were all, and I was like, look at this, it was all the reasons that it can be revoked. So it was a front and back, so I know that
Okay.
there's one, at least that Karen.
I was about to say, that's Karen Ferris. I'm sure she has
So I know that she.
developed that.
The other thing, we've been doing a lot of things wrong.
It's
that we're
okay.
hearing, but one thing that we've done is we kind of wanted our parents to know that it wasn't a guarantee. And so we have them every year fill it out again.
Okay.
I do too.
And that's fine if you want to proceed that way. I'm just telling you, for what I'm looking at, it's not required until they get to the next level.
So is the transfer request approved or denied by our signature, or is
No.
not approved or denied until you decide it?
It's not.
So it's like when we recommend a candidate to be interviewed by Dr. Cleveland, they're not hired till he says they are, so they're not approved until you say they are. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So will you get back in touch with us to let us know they've been approved?
They send the letter back to the school. Karen sends out the letter, and it goes back to the school and to the family.
And we can start doing it right from here on out.
Okay, good. That's what I like to hear.
You want the last few years, because I've got a stack.
You know what was so odd is, I asked, so we would have a couple of issues come up, and I would say, can I see all the elementary transfers? Because I'd be looking for somebody. And Karen would say, well, we just don't have very many. And I'm like, well, that's great.
We just don't have very many forms down at admin.
I understand now.
I'm gonna ask a question pertaining to athletics.
Okay.
So I'm looking at the JC2 form there, and it says that, if they're in district and they transfer, we know that athletics can't be a reason. So it says the transfer must be approved prior to Labor Day of the current school year. And it also says that, and that's football season. So if they transfer and they're on the football team at George and they transfer to Southwest, they can't play football at Southwest, and I understand that. But if they come September 15th and they're on the basketball team at Southwest, but then, are at George and then they go to Southwest at September 15th, does that mean they can't play basketball for that season, even though, because it's the September 1 day?
Play the game in uniform on the competition floor.
Okay, I just wanna make sure, because it
Yeah.
doesn't say that.
Well, that's why I put that this process, JC, has nothing to do with athletic
Okay.
eligibility. And what happens when
Well,
those,
it says it right here, it says the transfer must be approved prior to Labor Day of the current school year.
but that still doesn't guarantee they're
Okay.
AAA eligible. Those forms now have, does this student participate in activities?
Right.
If they check yes, Wayne Stellett gets a copy of it too, so that it's on his radar
I just
and
don't
he
wanna
can
punish a
communicate with.
kid not getting to participate in the season because their family moves September 30th.
Well, and, yeah.
And football, I understand, it's in season, they play the game, but, okay.
I would just say for everyone to keep a reminder that we have 7th grade athletics now. So when you put a kid in a feeder pattern that's not the feeder pattern they live in, and they hit 6th grade, and then they start playing athletics in 7th grade, those students consider themselves heavily vested in where they're participating for the first time. So if they live across the street from Southwest, but they're going to J.O.
Right. One thing I should have said at the beginning, I should probably highlight now since I'm going to be getting a bunch of elementary forms. If it doesn't fit in the policy, please deny it at the building level. I mean, I don't mind being the bad guy, and I get to do that quite a bit, but I get a number of forms that are approved at the building level that are, I want to go to this school because it's the best school. No, that's not a valid reason. So then I get to sign it and send the letter, it's denied. Just help me a little bit. Okay, I know there's lots of, this is a hot topic. So we're going to make it a little bit hotter. Let's talk about balance transfers and what happens when a spot opens back up. So, and I'll give the preface here that Dr. Cleveland and I have talked about all of this. He agreed that this is the process, whether it's what has been done, should have been done, doesn't matter. If you've got forced transfers and a spot opens back up in your school, you call that family and say, we've got a spot, would you like to come back? They say no. You say, that's fine. I'll need you to fill out an in-district transfer form and you can no longer ride the forced transfer bus. Ooh. And the reason is, eventually we want that bus to not have to run. If we get to close to, the last couple weeks of a semester, last couple weeks of the school year, that's okay. But when you call them back the second day of school and say, come on back, they say no, that's fine, but they've got to provide transportation. Christy?
So what often we get in a situation where we're sending like siblings
Uh-huh.
out, and we call them back and they say, no, I want to just keep the siblings together. You've only got a spot in 3rd grade, I need 3rd and 5th. Would they be allowed to stay on the bus if we move to the next person on the list with their sibling, or the parent would have to drive one and the other would want?
So both siblings were forced transferred,
Or all 3
or
or 4.
however many, and only a,
That's what you're saying, unless it's a sibling group.
yeah, a sibling group could stay because that would be a hardship on the
They would
family.
just stay on the transfer.
Yeah.
And sometimes we get an opening at the same time. for
Right,
parents.
that just depends.
I'm just sitting here thinking, we'll know all this, but we're sometimes not the first person that the parent encounters when they come in the office and ask these questions. And so like I've been thinking, I've gotta talk to, Kelly and Jasmine about this. Is there a way that when school starts back up, we can give them some of this same information? Because that's the first person the parents are gonna encounter.
So I've got like I said, a point page that will be on it. So I think if you put that in their hands, it'll get them to a start. Y'all, there are gonna be a million scenarios and we can't talk about all of them, but if we at least have a good guideline of what we're working on, and if we're all working on the same guidelines, I think we'll be more efficient.
What about a parent who wants to revoke their in-district transfer?
There's a form for that. There's a separate form if they want to rescind a transfer. They just fill it. I have it. I can link it. They just have it signed by both principals
We
and.
have a self-contained special ed who's been going to HAR-BER because the sibling is there, but now the sibling's graduated. And it's more convenient because they're in our zone, so they just need to get that form and sign it.
Yes. It also comes to my office.
Ms. Clay,
Yes.
I just want to tell the elementary principals that she does not send a letter to you letting you know, she sends a spreadsheet. So the
Oh.
parents, I didn't mean it.
No, that's fine.
I get to look at a lot of transfers.
Yeah.
So the parents receive a letter from Ms. Clay or the district office, Dr. Cleveland, saying their transfer was approved or denied. And then Ms. Ferris keeps a spreadsheet. I don't know if y'all already keep that system. She keeps a spreadsheet that is broken down by, I get the middle school, junior high and high school one. I'm assuming there's an elementary one, but since.
There's actually not because we have so few elementary forms.
I wouldn't want them to be thinking they're gonna receive a letter.
Okay, that helps.
She sent us back a copy of the transfer form signed. Ms. Ferris.
Okay, so we get a spreadsheet, I don't know.
Okay, I'll check with her. I'll put that process in there too, but you all should be notified of the transfer.
And you want, in-district transfers, school choice transfers, people who are working full-time for the district transfers, you want all of that?
No, just the in-district.
Just in-district
Yep.
transfers.
Not employed.
If they're employees that live in our district, yes, that would be on an in-district form.
What about ones who live outside?
But if they live outside, they can just be enrolled. Is that clear? No?
I have a question about balance transfers.
Okay.
Is there a point where we just hold students over? Because I
Yes.
know towards the end of the year, it'd be like 2 weeks left of school and we have somebody come enroll and you hate to send them somewhere for 2 weeks.
Yeah, so I hate that this is being recorded, so there's going to be a record of this, but the magic date is October 1. We've got to be in compliance on October 1, and after that date, unless somebody came and looked, nobody's monitoring every day. And I say nobody, meaning nobody at the state level that would sanction us for it. Nobody's monitoring that every day. If they were to do that, they would look and say, hey, you're over, you need to fix it. We would say, oh, we had no idea, let's fix that. Something that Dr. Slocum and I have worked on and hope to continue to work is to actually ask the State Board of Education for a class size waiver. And that's not to pack a bunch of kids in a kindergarten class, but it's to allow us to do what we've already been doing without being in violation of the law. So every day that we're over, we're in violation of the law. So your attorney's up here saying, yes, we violate the law. And we could be cited with our standards for accreditation because of that. But if we got a waiver, we would have a little bit more flexibility to hold a student when we know this student is moving out tomorrow. But yes, we're over. I'm sure you've all experienced that. If, the beginning of the school year, we need to find everybody a place. When you get towards, it happened right before Christmas break, and then again at the end of school, suddenly our numbers went up, and we just said, hold on to that. Okay, I think we've talked about a lot of these scenarios, but you need to fill out a transfer, moving to the next level. If you want to implement it where they do it every year, that's up to you. I'm not going to stop you.
Would you want those forms every year then? Or
If you're signing them every year, then I would want them every year.
But for this coming year, really all you want are kindergarten. Because, most of ours have been already kids that are already there.
Well, if you're granting new people to come in.
Right, new people and then kindergarten. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, because
I guess the practice at Westwood has been to do them every year, and so, but they're all kids that have already been there for this whole,
If they've already been there, I don't need the form.
Okay.
But you're.
Kendra, I think y'all are gonna have to run into a problem of tracking and knowing, this is where we're getting into a problem at junior high level. If we got one school that cannot put one more kid in the classroom without putting them on a roof, and we got schools that are losing enrollment because we don't know that these kids are in elementary or out of zone. If you don't know who's out of zone, I don't know how you can predict what kids are gonna be in the middle schools and junior highs. So if we haven't been sending these forms in, and we think, just because we think all the kids go to, say, Westwood, live in Westwood zone, but we've actually got kids from all over the district that go there. If you don't know who those kids are, I don't know how you track and can predict what kids are gonna be in junior high, middle school and junior high.
That's why we need to know who those kids
That's why
are.
I'm saying, I think any kid that's on it, we need to say, this is just me talking, assistant principal at Southwest, we need to send every kid that's on you need to know every kid's on a transfer, whether they've been there 1 year or 5 years.
If you send us a
We just
spreadsheet,
hit the point right now with enrollment where Central has 400 more kids than we do. 400 more.
I'm gonna pause just for a second, because I wanna make sure we get to everything that everybody
Yeah.
happening in high school, it's because of that form issue. And so when she had the conversation with Ms. Ferris, and we said, we don't have any transfers before seventh grade, it's like, maybe we do.
We had a few. I thought y'all were doing a great job of screening them and not approving.
Yeah, so it'll take us, it'll take us a little bit to sort it out, but there's never been a system put in place to say, this is what this is, which is, by the way, why we're having these in the first place, to have a conversation to go, oh, well, there are transfers before sixth grade. Good to know.
Okay, a couple of things I want to highlight on transfers, and then we'll go on. And if we have time at the end, we'll come back to whatever we need to talk about. A student attending pre-K at your school, that's not the golden ticket either to keep going. Parents think that it is, and it's not. Siblings, we've talked about siblings. This applies to siblings that are at the school, not all my siblings and aunts and uncles and everybody has always gone to a certain school, so I want to go to that school, and they have been out of that school for 15 years. Okay, another fun topic, custody issues. So I get questions about custody issues almost every day. I don't envy your position of being put into a situation where you've got to know what's going on in each set of parents' personal lives, who has custody when, but we'll talk about a few things. I don't think that there is a good answer for these other than we've got to read what the court orders say. And then there's always a question of, are the court orders that you have the latest in the series of whatever's going on? So I always tell people to ask both parties, whether it's parents, grandparents, whoever it is, ask both parties for the latest court order. They should have them. If they don't, they can ask their attorney, but we need to know the latest. Sometimes I'm able to look the court case up and pull it directly, but a lot of times if they're involving extremely sensitive issues, the court will seal that and I don't have access to it. So ask both parties. They need to provide the latest court order. Also know that a parent's rights to the child and a parent's rights to his or her education records are two completely different things. So access to the child, as far as I'm going to take them home with me, I'm going to come eat lunch with them, is going to be governed by a custody order that could say any number of things. That's why we have to look at them. Access to the child's education records are there unless specifically revoked by a court order. So if you don't have a court order that says mom does not have rights to the child's education records, it has to be that specific, then that parent would be entitled to records. That's not access to the child, it's access to records.
One question, what if someone called on the phone and said, I'm such and such dad, and I want access to his records?
I would say, come on in. Yeah. If they're out of state, I would ask for a copy of a driver's license, birth certificate. We would just need to verify identity. So this has come up a couple of times where mom or dad, I don't want to be particular and always say dad is not in the particular. Let's say mom is not in the picture. Mom's not in the picture, and all of a sudden she shows up. You haven't seen or heard anything about her all year, and she says, I want Johnny's records. Well, yes, under the law you have to give them to her unless you have something that revokes her rights. But what you can do is say, oh, well, we'll have to get those together for you. Let me take your name and number. I'll call you back when they're ready. And then call dad and say, hey, mom showed up. We've got 45 days to comply with records requests. And so, mom, you've got 45 days to get a court order in place if you don't want us to give, or whoever, I'd switch mom and dad, but dad, you've got 45 days to get a court order in place if you don't want mom to have access to the records. Now, sometimes parent says, oh, it's okay, go ahead and give them to them. Sometimes they say, I'm going to my attorney's office right now. But that's just a little tool that you can keep in your tool belt of how to still comply with the law, but not just say, oh yeah, we got to give you records, your mom or dad. It's happened this year. 45 days for records, yes.
And is that in all cases? I had a parent call me the other day, she's a foster mom, and she wanted, I think she's gonna homeschool, so she said she needed records. And, I don't think she actually has the rights to the records. I just left it blank, because I called our, registrar, and, so I'm not giving it to her, but, until I know more, but she thinks she needs them by a certain date in order for the child to be enrolled in the I don't know what they're doing,
Well,
homeschool or academy or whatever.
Yeah, she may need them for their compliance, but we don't have to provide them. We can do better than that most days. I wouldn't say to every parent, oh, we're waiting 45 days. I would give them to them as soon as possible, just as a customer service issue. Foster parents would have access to those records. Anybody who's standing in place of a parent, it doesn't have to be an official legal guardianship. If they're in loco parentis, in the place of a parent.
And I don't know if they're necessarily legal foster parents.
Okay, that would be something to explore.
What about an 18-year-old and their parents say, I want all this stuff, but the kid's 18?
At 18, the rights to records transfers to the student, yes. And we may need to do a training sometime on FERPA just by itself. This is all FERPA, or the records piece of it is FERPA.
Kendra, do you have any suggestions for us? Because so often you get a court order, and that court order has a date that they're gonna go back to court. But that parent doesn't give you any paperwork. And so all along, you're thinking, okay, well, this other parent can't come, and then lo and behold, out of the blue, you find out that, you know, they've been back to court, but you never received new documentation. I mean,
Well,
I don't know.
yeah, if you're restricting a parent, then you would say to the parent you're restricting, the documentation we have right now says that you can't. If there's something new, bring it to me. And then at the same time say, other parent, is there something new out there that we need to know about?
When you get that document and it says, we will go back to court on this date, I mean, should you just call the parent back and say, do you have your documentation? I know you went back to court.
I wouldn't put any credence in that date because that's just they probably had one hearing, they put it down, but the way litigation works is those dates are pushed and pushed and pushed, so that doesn't mean they're actually going back. That means they got on the court's calendar and then a million things happened between point A and point B and they didn't actually go back.
Kendra, we've had a parent that, well, we think it's a parent, that called for student records, wanted their birth certificate faxed to them randomly someplace out of state, but we're not even sure who that, if they were really that parent. What would you give us advice for that?
I would ask the person to give some documentation that they are the parent. If they're asking for the birth certificate, it's probably not the birth certificate, but something that proves that they're actually the parent and entitled to that.
What would you ask?
If there's not a birth certificate, honestly, if they're looking for the birth certificate, I would tell them to call the records department of whatever state the child was born in. They should provide the birth certificate.
We have parents that come get them for court reasons.
Right.
Custodial parents and stuff that come. 'Cause they
Right,
have
but if we can't verify that they're the parent, then
Or out of state calling. This happened yesterday to us.
the burden's on them to prove to us that they're the parent. We don't have to say, oh, we think you're the parent, we're giving this. And I should mention too that regardless of, here's another thing I wish wasn't recorded, regardless of what the law says, if it's a student safety issue, keep the students safe. When we start talking about, we'll go into access to kids and parents coming to pick a child up. If it's a safety issue, call the police. I don't care what a custody agreement says. And So that's one of the things I love about this job is we get to say, law says this, reality says this. What does that look like in practice? So we'll go through a couple of scenarios, and then I'm sure this will spark some thought. Mom and dad have joint custody with student living with mom 1 week and dad 1 week. Dad comes to school to eat lunch with the student on mom's week. This one, I would not mess with trying to figure out whose week is whose. You have way too much stuff to be doing. So if mom and dad are both active participants in the child's life, there we go. If it's an issue and mom gets upset about it, then say, hey, mom, you need to provide us with something that says that they can't do this. All we can go by is what our records show.
Our problem is not the joint custody, our problem is whoever has the main custody and the other has visitation, and they want to come in and do their visitation a lot of times during the school day. Hey, can you come down to the office so I can talk to them? I'm going to go have lunch with them. And what we've always said, tell me if we're wrong, is, that visitation is really not supposed to interfere with the school day.
So you're saying that a court order says they've got visitation once a week and they want that to be at school?
They still have their visitation outside of school as regular, but they are also wanting to come up at lunch or hang out at recess or something. They're wanting to do things in addition to what the court document says, and we tell them, no, visitation. Here's when it says visitation is that's outside of school hours, because it's not meant to interfere with that. But they still want to go eat. You mean I can't even go down and have lunch with them?
If the visitation is strictly outside of school hours, then I think that's accurate. If it's something, so say, and this may be in here, dad's got the kids 1 or 2 nights a week and then every other weekend, I think you let dad have lunch with the student. Something that we cannot be charged with, and I know some of y'all are doing, we can't be responsible for knowing everybody's custody agreement. And my days with my dad is this day and his is this. So if there's access to the child at some time during the school week, then I think they get to come and have lunch with the child. Now, when you start talking about leaving, that gets a little bit trickier, but just lunch with the student. That's still joint custody if there's access during the school week. And that's exactly what this is. If it's only custody on the weekend, then that gets where I wouldn't allow them to come eat lunch. And always just tell principals or whoever's asking, parents that are mad at me, if you want something different, you want us to do something different, go have a judge order us to do it. We're always going to obey what a judge says. They don't want to do that.
And the problem with that, what we found is the main custodial parent doesn't want their community lunch.
Yes.
Mhm.
So it's more of like, we're trying to enforce what the main custodial parent wants, and they're not communicating. Like, we feel like we're in the middle of it.
So the conversation goes 2 ways. And Mom, you don't want Dad to come eat lunch. Get us something that says that's not part of your agreement. They're asking us to be judges and interpret what the court ordered, and we can't do that. So if it's not explicitly stated in the court order and they don't like how we're doing it, they need to have the court direct us to do something differently. And they will.
And then we've always said changes of custody can't happen on school property. Is that?
That's state law, yes.
Kendra, sometimes I usually just call the custodial parent and say, hey, Dad's up here, wants to have lunch, and just give me a heads up. And they usually don't argue with that because it's just more of power play and they have their own.
Yeah, sometimes they want to come every day or every other day. They're up there constantly, and that's when it gets to be a problem.
Right.
What about grandparents?
Oh, we're going to talk about grandparents. We'll,
Yeah, go back to the one
oh, we need to talk about this one? Okay. This, or something very similar happened. I don't remember which school it was. Dad was recently released from prison and hasn't seen his child in 7 years. He is listed on the birth certificate and no custody order is in place. and suddenly shows up to your school. Oh. So, he wants to do 3 things. See his child, take his child, see his child's records. What do you think?
First one and the last one.
Okay, okay. We got lots of discussion. So,
4th bullet that says call Kendra.
yes, that's perfect.
Just go back and correct you, we have a term for that, it's called clayification.
That's true. Yes. So seeing the child's records, that's the one I am most comfortable with. But again, the scenario, the tool in your tool belt of calling whoever is taking care of that child and saying, hey, somebody's shown up, their dad, they want records, telling dad, you've got 45 days to get them together. Sometimes dad just goes away and never comes back. Sometimes he comes back in 45 days, but that's when to use that tool. I wouldn't be overly eager to provide those records to someone you haven't seen all through the school year. This was towards the end of the school year, and the school had never seen or heard of this person, and they show up. I am very certain you should not let him take the child. That is one of those that even if there were a court order in place that said, or in this case, there's no custody order that says he can't, no. If you need help, call the police. See his child. I'm again really iffy on this. If you haven't seen parent all year, he's not on the card, there's no custody order. At that point, I would just say, we've got to get some additional information. You'll have to come back another time and work with whoever the custodian of the child to get something in place. But this happens, unfortunately, so just need to be prepared.
Say they're not even in prison. Say we've had this
Yeah.
child for 4 years, the parent lives out of state, we've never seen this child's parent or whoever, and they show up, and we have nothing in place, but we can deny.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, if you...
It's on the birth certificate.
Just because they're on a birth certificate doesn't mean they have access to that child. So if there were red flags of you've never seen this person before and suddenly they're there to pick up a child, even if it's as simple as, hold on just a second, go into a back room and call mom and say, so-and-so's here, is this okay? But yeah, absolutely, especially when it comes to someone taking a child from your school, I would be overly cautious on when that can happen.
What about so we have sometimes parents will separate or whatever, and the mom will call her dad and say, I don't want them picking them up. We don't go to court, until they go to court, if the parent shows up, we have to. Or is
Yes.
that again where you would call and say they're here,
Well, so mom and dad have been picking up all throughout the school year. Suddenly they get divorced and mom says, I don't want him picking up. Say, you need to go to your attorney and get a restraining order. Those they can issue those same day, and that's what would need to happen.
My thing is, 1 week the parent calls and says not, and then the next week they say, I need dad to come pick them up, and I'm like, make up your minds, people, sorry.
Right.
Can't keep up with it.
There has to be a valid reason, yes. But they can be issued really quickly.
We had a situation with a dad, actually the student had been with mom up until kindergarten school year, two weeks before school started, first grade, went to dad. And that had happened, we had an all school year, 2 to 3 weeks before school without, mom came to school, we hadn't seen her from mom at all, mom came to school, dad actually had just checked him out prior to that, not knowing, and so, police were called to the house and things like that, but dad kept him out of school because he
Right.
I have one,
Okay.
this is the end of the year, I was a pre-K student, and, it just came to us, mom came in, I called mom in for a conference and found out that dad had just been released from prison and is a registered sex offender.
Mm-hmm.
But she does not have there's nothing filed to keep him away from the child. And so she did put him on the card, and she does give him access to the child, because it was he was a registered offender on someone else.
Do you know what level?
I don't.
Uh-huh.
So do I
Yeah.
have a right to, I mean, she was not wanting him, she said he complies and does come up to the school, he'll usually call and say, I'm supposed to pick up the child today, you know, at the school that he was at in Rogers, but, I'm just trying to prepare for next year. Like, is there any automatic thing for registered sex offenders?
No, not with their own children, just because they're a registered sex offender. But there are restrictions for registered sex offenders on campus, and I can send those to you. We'll need to know what level he is, because depending on what level the sex offender is, they have different restrictions. But picking up the child, it'll depend on the level. We'll look at it. That's okay. Grandparents.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, let's do one more question, then we'll talk about grandparents.
If a child, is at home with the mom in the morning and then the dad picks them up, in the afternoon, are they allowed to bring to school their weekend, overnight bags and all of that stuff?
Yeah, there's no restriction on that.
That's not considered a transfer? Okay.
No, it's the actual handoff on school property. The idea is that they don't want fights to happen on school property, but those sometimes happen anyway. I don't remember who it was, but somebody had a fun one this year. Okay, grandparents, just real quickly, they don't have standalone rights, and oftentimes mom and dad are bickering, and that transfers to mom or dad's parents as well. It's up to the parents to give that access, and you're navigating the same waters as with custody. It's unfortunate that sometimes grandparents get lumped into that, but if parents are in the picture, then they have the key to who has access to the child, say for coming to eat lunch.
Does their paperwork have to be signed by a judge, or can it be notarized?
It has to be signed by a judge, court order, yeah.
For grandparents?
Oh, no, are you talking about just custody orders in general?
For grandparents.
Oh.
Like if a parent was allowing the grandparents to raise their child, do they
Oh, okay.
notarize, or?
You're talking about guardianship.
Yes.
Yeah. For the purpose of school attendance, it does not have to be an official legal guardianship. It doesn't even have to be a piece of paper.
What if they come and sign, IEPs?
If they're acting in the place of the parent and there's no indication that parent is actually in the picture, then that's okay.
Hey, Kendra, can you go back to the guardianship? So anybody can come enroll a child in school and say, I'm taking care of this child, and that's okay.
Well, I think you gotta
I'm just
be.
thinking of the Marshallese population where we don't know.
Yeah, so the law says anybody who has care or control of a child who lives in the state shall enroll that child. So it doesn't have to be an official legal guardianship if that person is actually in the place of a parent. That's the criteria.
Kendra, going back to the exchanging on school property, between parents, like, they can't do the I'm going to you kind of thing. But what if it's like, is that apply to after school hours? Because so often we have like girls on the run and things like that, so does that still apply like after school?
Well, it's not saying that mom can't drop off on Friday morning and dad can't pick them up,
No,
but
I'm talking about literally exchanging in the school parking lot, like bringing your cars and doing.
the law says on school property.
Okay,
Yeah, it doesn't specify during school hours.
okay.
Okay, we're going to go on to attendance, and I don't have a lot about this, so we'll talk about this, or we'll talk about what other things you want to talk about. The big news: there's a new elementary and middle school policy that allows 7 absences per semester instead of 14. So, yay. And I would like to take credit for it. I did not do it. Dr. Morledge, probably my second day at work here in Springdale, said, we already revised this policy. We really need it to happen. She had already done some work with some of you to get that in place. The board approved it this week. So I'll be sending out soon a link to all of the revised policies. Read it. It allows principals to look at the reasons for the transfer, or not for the transfer, sorry, transfers on the brain. Reasons for the absences before deciding if it's a reason to refer to anybody or to recommend retention. That's added in the policy. And I understand nobody will listen, DHS or courts will not listen when we say a student has excessive attendance problems, but I don't have a lot of control over that. All we can do is keep telling them, but I do know they definitely won't listen until a policy's been violated. So hopefully this will help and will encourage parents to bring their kids to school. Are there other attendance questions? Yes.
Is there a plan to present that to parents, like citywide? I mean, you know what I mean, like so it's not just like the parent who's missed 40 days for 5 years in a row, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. On maybe front page on the newspaper, it'll.
There's a new sheriff in town. I like that headline. It catches your attention.
It'll obviously be in the handbook. We maybe can put a special insert of like, take note, post it on our Facebook page. A lot will be communication at the building level, especially as those attendance or as those absences start accumulating. But yeah, that's a great idea, is that we need to make sure people know before they're in trouble on that.
Are tardies included in that at all?
There's a statement
There's-
in there about tardies to play into whether or not a principal considers reasons for absences. It's vague, but it's there. So you
Or
can
early
pull that in.
dismissal, or they pick them up early? I just didn't know if there was a time when.
It's not that specific. It's pretty broad and purposefully, I think, that to give you some flexibility. And if we need to do more with it, we can work on it for next year. Okay, that is all that I have prepared, but I am happy to answer any questions about these topics or anything else that we need to talk more about.
And it may be in the policy, but I'm just curious what other buildings, like if a parent calls in and says my kid's sick, is that automatic excuse, or is this any
It's not
absence?
excuse. This is any absence. What you get to do is get to go back and look at maybe the reasons for those absences and deciding whether you do anything about those absences.
So we really,
We have a doctor's note.
we tried unexcused and excused, right?
Yeah, the law changed in 13 and then changed back in 15. At the state level, they did away with the ability to excuse absences in 13, and people had a fit. They changed it back in 15. So
It was changed to what in 15?
it was changed in 13 where it was just absences. Statewide, it was just absences. And then they changed it back to you could have excused or unexcused in 15. Melissa?
If you have a parent that, you know, their child's had fever 15 times that year, it's okay to say from this point on, in order for us to excuse this absence, we need a doctor's note.
Yes.
Because 15 fevers is not normal, there could be symptoms later on with your kid.
Yes. Yeah, and it also, you know, if maybe not, well, fevers, but say they're missing a lot for something,
Yeah, they
that
just
may
always
be
have
some,
an excuse. And, you know, I'm a parent, I've got young kids, and sometimes they get sick.
Right.
You can always take them to the doctor.
Right.
I get that, but if they're constantly, continually sick,
yes.
then they may need to seek your medical attention.
Yeah, that's right.
If they're vomiting 5 times a week, that's not good.
Right. And it also may clue you in on the need for a 504 if they're saying they're missing a lot for something and they're going to continue, they have severe allergies or something, they may need to get a 504 in place to protect any steps against excessive absences.
What
No, this is just Springdale.
This is just, so I think my question comes back to, because that we're all so excited about it, but
What do you do?
what's gonna happen, because the last we heard from the courts were, 14 days, and even if it is 14 days of a semester, there's still really not anything happening.
I don't think anything will happen at the court level or DHS because, Shane's putting his hand up. But from what I'm hearing, they won't touch them, but it gives you some authority to say your child could be retained. We may turn it over to the authorities. Parents don't have to know that nothing will happen. Shane?
Well, I've been to court a lot this year with Judge Zimmerman. I know several of you probably have been, but she's been very specific with us that if they bring a doctor's note, is the only way we excuse them for medical, the way she would excuse them. If she just calls in, if a parent just calls in and says my kid's sick, she does not consider that as an excused absence, and she will handle them if they go over our policy. We file the fins, she will get the parent in court and wanna know why that kid's not in school, and she will hold that. I've seen her lock up parents this year, or she fined one $500 the other day.
Oh, that's good that she's taking them, because I had heard throughout this year that they're not taking any absences.
They have to be outside the policy.
Okay,
You can't say, like, if they're not outside the policy, they will not take them.
right.
But she will get them in and she will hammer the parents.
But it took 4 months for one of his to make.
Well, it does take, it's not immediate.
Oh, yeah.
You file the fins, it may
It
take
takes-
3 or 4 months to get in, but she will get them in.
That's good. So that's good
Well, and
news.
she really wants the historical data.
Yes.
She wants to see year
She
after
wants to
year.
see, like, the first time I went, she scolded me because I brought in numbers, like, this kid was absent 32 days. Well, what were these 32 absences? Well, I don't know, there are 32 absences. And so from then on out, I pulled the e-school report, showed every day, what they missed for, and then she was real happy with that. And
Okay.
She will handle it.
That's good to know. Good information. Shauna?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Ms. Godney, the district liaison, is meeting with her again this summer to go over all of our policies.
Okay.
So this would be good to add. We're also, one of the things that I've been talking to Judge Zimmerman about is just like cause she like court orders some random stuff sometimes.
Mhm.
Like she'll court order them homeschool, but it has to be virtual. Or you have to get your GED, but you're 15. And so we pulled all those laws for her and all those rules and regs.
Yeah.
And so Michelle's going over all that with her too, making her just like a quick reference notebook.
Okay.
So.
That's good.
She's court ordered us, like, she's court ordered a child to stay at our school if
Uh-huh.
they don't live in our attendance area.
Common, yeah.
What do we call you?
No, that's common.
That's
If
common.
we've got a court order that says do something, we are going to do it.
Okay.
Well, and this is explained to us in elementary. My counselor said that FINS will not take our cases. They will take it, I think, for older kids because if it's like truancy, like the
Yeah.
child is not showing up and the parent. So it was explained to us that we have there's nothing we can do for FINS, unless the child is like walking to school and going somewhere else.
Okay.
For us,
Well,
it's a parent issue and then it's DHS.
I'll see if we can put that on her radar. If Ms. Godney's meeting with her this summer, I may try to tag along to that and just see her perspective or what she thinks our options are. But
I've done some attendance before, and a lot of times it is the parent's problem, but she'll give it to the parent. And Kendra, she took mine, we had just a kid that had 51.5 days, and she took it, we go to court in August.
okay.
And I also called it up to the DHS, and if you use the words educational neglect, they usually take it.
Okay.
I've
Did
never
y'all
had one denied.
did y'all hear that? She said kind of the key words with DHS or educational neglect.
So when you hotline it in DHS, they take it, that goes through differential response, and they will go to the house and talk to the parent, which has scared a lot of ours into compliance. 'Cause
Okay.
we told them up until that point, we're going to contact authorities if this isn't fixed, and then the authorities show up, then they know you're serious.
Okay.
It goes through differential response. It's not an investigation, it's a different division of DHS, but they do show up, they keep on top of it. And a lot of times when they get into the home, they'll find other things that will be re-hotlined in and turned into an investigation.
Okay.
And they can open a case too.
That's good.
To help the family.
thing I will say is, I've seen this, being in court, you get to see a lot of other cases.
Mm-hmm.
If you file offense and you don't show up, the judge's not gonna, like, say, they're not gonna send the cops to come get you as a principal, cause you didn't go to court, but she loses all reference when she signs random stuff, it's because she doesn't know what else to do.
Okay.
So if we get a summons that says we need to be in court for, we need to make sure somebody from the school, district, whether it's principal, counselor, district
Yeah.
liaison, whoever is there, so that she can have a frame of reference, cause she's never asked me what I thought and not done what I thought.
That's good.
For the child.
Yeah, if you get a subpoena, she may not come to your house and throw anybody in jail, but she could. So please comply with that.
Big deal, if she just doesn't know, if she doesn't know what to do, so she's just gonna start randomly saying stuff.
And she doesn't know what options are actually there.
She'll even tell you that, she's doing what best she knows how, she needs our expertise in the courtroom, that's why we go.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, what else about this or anything else?
You say we can do something about tardies and picking up early.
It's not specific in the policy. What, Mr. Slope?
It just basically says, that can be considered for, when, the policy says that the principal gets to consider reasons for absences as far as making a determination. There's no longer a cut and dry excuse versus an excuse.
Yep.
So it gives you that leeway to say, hey, you called in 15 times with a fever and this just isn't cutting it, so you know what, you can stop doing this or we're gonna turn you into DHS. Or, and then there's just a little blurb, excessive tardies can be considered for referral for authorities or something along those terms.
Maybe it was changed, but I thought there was something in the district policy about, what constituted an absence in the class, and it was like 15 minutes, it gave a percentage of the class.
If they missed.
Okay.
I think there is something in the policy about that, cause I remember reading it, that, and then, so, the way we've always done it is if they check out 15 minutes early, you know,
They're
then
absent.
that counts as an absence in that period, and those periods add up, four periods is a full day absence. So then if they do that 4 times, that's a day, and then 4 more times, that's another day. Does that make sense?
That we're considered here at 11:30, so 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock is a full day.
Oh,
At
okay, so it's
2:01.
different. That might help secondary, but maybe not help you.
Yeah, we use 1:30.
Okay.
But
I'll have to look and see. I don't.
And know that they get a full day in. Cause they don't sit in traffic or whatever.
So they check them out at 1:30?
2:30 or 2:45.
Yeah, let me look at that. I don't want to speculate on what I don't think the elementary policy is that, the elementary middle policy is that specific, but I think we have another policy on that. Okay, if there's nothing else, oh.
Like you mentioned FERPA, can you
Uh-huh.
kind of just give us an overview?
Woo, sure.
Like just a quick, we can't, since we have, I don't know.
Yeah. So FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It's a federal law that guarantees parents access to student records. I have a whole presentation on this, not with me, but I'll go through what I can remember from it. You have 45 days to comply. Parents or whoever's standing in place of the parent, it gets those records. Those rights transfer to the student at age 18 and are no longer the parents. So your 18-year-old's mom has to go through her student to get those records. It also requires directory information, disclosure to parent, or opt out before disclosure to parents. I'll be perfectly honest, we have not done a great job with that in this district. You'll see next year we're going to have an actual long, very legal reading FERPA policy that says parent, this is what directory information is. So when I say directory information, it's typically name, grade, stuff you would see in a yearbook is a good way to describe it. Can be released without your consent unless you opt out. So we'll ask them to opt out of that. that means that if they've opted out, we can't give it out. If they haven't opted out, we can. Outside of directory information, if you were to release a student record to someone other than that parent or the eligible student who had turned 18, you got to have parental written consent.
So DHS, this year it was so bad about phone calls. I'm from DHS and I need attendance records for blah, blah, blah. I don't know that you're from we got into an argument because we wouldn't give that information out. We wouldn't just fax it to them. And they think, they think that just if they email us with their little logo at the bottom, that's sufficient too. So we had a real struggle with that.
So there are certain enabling statutes that allow that. FERPA has a list of several exceptions. One of those is if state law allows it. So in certain instances, DHS would have access. One that happens quite a bit is the attorney ad litems who are appointed for kids call and say, I need to come get the records, talk to your counselor about so-and-so. We just need to look in each instance to make sure we have the authority to release that. If you want to send me an email, I'll look at it. It's usually something I can tell really quick. The attorney ad litems will actually have a court order that appoints them and authorizes them. With DHS, it depends on what division they're in, and there's all kinds of.
How do I confirm? They are not coming to the school to show their badge. They are if they want to talk to the child, but then they want information that.
Attendance records on email.
Just to email me those.
So we would.
They expect a call and I'm supposed to comply.
No, we need something from them. If they're they can send us an email with a letter. There's official DHS letterhead. If you work for the state of Arkansas, you have an @arkansas.gov email address or @dhs.arkansas.gov. So there are some ways that we can verify the identity, and then we can verify this is what they're looking for. Do we have the authority to give that to them? A lot of times I call them back and say, can you point me, they usually send me to their legal department, but can you tell me what the enabling statute is for this? Where can you give me your authority? Because they usually have it just like that. And so then if we say, okay, there's a state law that authorizes this, then we can give it to them. But we need to verify.
I've had them fax me their badge before.
Uh-huh.
As proof, and they send it back. Is that okay? As status?
I would want. I would look at their email address. I would want them to write a letter that's on letterhead, because somebody could steal a badge or go have a badge made. People are crafty and crazy. Yes.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm right. If we get an email from them, they correspond with our secretary who handles attendance, and she knows it's someone that has an open case or whatever, that is fine. She can take care of all that, send those attendance records.
Who's asking for them? DHS?
Yes.
We need to know what they're looking for them for and make sure there's a statute that authorizes that. Just because they're DHS doesn't mean that they have access to them.
Well, it's somebody from the defense court. It's from somebody from the court.
Okay.
It's not DHS, sorry, let me clarify that. It's
Somebody from the court. Then they will likely have a court order that says you get to do this, and we would need to look at that. And it's not a hard process to verify. I know it sounds a little bit complicated, but they email you a couple things, we do a little bit of research and say it's okay. At that point, I don't have a big problem with emailing things. I've gotten that question quite a bit, because when I email, I have a password, the person theoretically has a password, and we can correspond that way. I actually think it's safer than putting it in the mail, because you don't know who's picking up the mail from the mailbox.
Can you go to verification? You mentioned the verification process. Is there like you call DHS to verify?
When they call to ask you for something, I would say, could you send me an email on DHS letterhead, or can you send me an email from your DHS account?
The verification of if it's appropriate for them to have that information.
Oh, okay. You can ask them. You could, and this may be something that you can send it to me, and I'll call and ask them. Do you know the statute that allows you access to this? Because our standard answer is no, you don't get access to this unless.
Do I ask that every time, or, like, if I know if I've hotlined somebody for attendance and they're calling and asking me for attendance, I can just give it to them, because I know that
You initiated that.
that's appropriate.
Right. So if it's the same, if you're comfortable in classifying what kind of case it is and you know there's access because you've looked at whether there's access before, that's okay. But I would verify their identity every time.
Right.
Hey, Kendra, if you could add that portion to this, because our registrars deal with that a whole lot.
Okay.
They're the first line a lot of times, and, so if we can make sure they have that information too.
Sure, I can do that. Okay, anything else? Did I cover enough with FERPA?
That was my main,
Okay.
my main thing.
There's a number of exceptions, but and I do this, I don't know all the exceptions, so if I get a request, I pull up the law and say, okay, where does it fit in? And if it doesn't fit in, I tell whoever is requesting them, I'm not seeing where this fits, or is there something you see differently than I do? And
Do we have 45 days to get to DHS too?
technically, but I would not recommend that.
I mean, there are allies, because I mean,
Yeah.
like, I don't want to be a stinker about it, but she just got really nasty, because I wouldn't just offer the information over the phone.
I'm sure they get a lot of people who just give it, and so then when they hit a road bump, yeah. But that doesn't make it right or okay or legal. Okay, well, thank y'all. Oh, one more question.
Well, Pete and I were discussing earlier, and how many lawyers does it take to screw in a light bulb? Can you weigh in on that?
Oh, that's a good one. I was waiting for it. He already told me he was going to lawyer joke me. I don't know. I've never tried to screw.
Pete might have the answer.
Okay, Pete. Okay. Thank y'all for coming.
Oh, Kendra, I have one more thing.
Okay.
What about suspensions and 10 days and sped test?
Oh, you know what? I got that question before we started, and I text